Welcome again to Educator.com, and now we are going to do another story check-in, and this we're going to be talking about symbols and symbolism in literature and also in movies or video games or pretty much any other thing that tells a story. So, we're going to go over a couple questions here. And first off, we need to know, what is a symbol? Well, that's kind of a big category. What do I mean by that? And then we're going to ask, what kinds of stories use symbols most often? Some more than others. And there's also a very interesting question about who actually puts the symbols in the book. Did the writer put them on purpose, or did the audience find them later? Well, there's a lot of other things about that. And then fourth, we're going to go briefly over how to identify and also how to interpret symbols. So, let us begin. Oh, wow, here's a symbol. This is a symbol of a big golden statue with wings and a staff and a golden wreath. Well, it turns out that this statue is a symbol. Specifically, it is the Roman goddess Victoria. And I bet you can figure out what she is a symbol for. Well, she's a symbol for victory. Have you ever seen that Nike swoosh symbol on your sneakers? Well, that was kind of one of her symbols. So she is a symbol for victory. How do I know that she's a symbol of victory and not a symbol of gold and wealth? Well, because the Romans made this statue, and I'm going to think like a Roman when I look at this statue. And once I know that, I'm going to interpret it like a Roman would. I'm not going to just make up a meaning and say, oh, that golden statue? Well, that's a symbol of, I don't know, religious diversity in the United States. Well, no, that's not what this statue is all about. And she's not even about victories in sports, by the way. I'm talking about bloody, brutal military victory. That is what this goddess symbolizes. Oh, hey, what's this symbol? Well, this is a cross, so it must symbolize Christianity, right? Now let's get a little bit more specific than that, and let's think about who uses a symbol and how they interpret it. Well, this is a specific kind of cross. You notice it has this little circle behind it, and you notice the edges of the cross kind of fan out a little bit. This is a Celtic cross. And Celtic crosses symbolize not just Christianity in general, but it's kind of a patriotic and a religious symbol of, Christianity in places like Ireland. That is what the Celtic cross symbolizes. Oh, hey, what does this symbolize? This one should be pretty familiar. It should symbolize run away scared because you're going to get radiation poisoning if you open this door. This is a warning symbol, a radiation symbol. And it's our symbol in the United States, so we're just going to interpret it like we're supposed to interpret it. Hey, look at that. I don't want to get radiation poisoning. Danger might be one word I use to describe this symbol. So, what really is a symbol? Well, a symbol is like a concrete thing. It's something you can touch, you can feel, you can see, that symbolizes and represents something intangible. So like that Celtic cross, Christianity in Ireland isn't something I can touch. Military victory isn't something I can touch or see. Only these symbols that are tangible, that I can touch and I can see, that's what they mean. Now, what kinds of stories use symbols? Well, just about any story can use symbols. One great example is a little novella called The Pearl. It's all about a, poor Mexican man who dives into the ocean and pulls out this really great pearl. And this pearl plays a role in the story, and it eventually becomes a symbol of greed, corruption, danger, and just kind of sadness and bad luck, ironically. So that's what it symbolizes. In the sci-fi genre, in that kind of story, we use symbols as kind of analogies for kind of our world and contemporary events. An example is this resource called the spice in Dune. It's on this desert planet, you have to dig in the sand for it, and it's very dangerous to gather, and it's really, really important. I'll tell you what that's an analogy for later. Most frequently, symbols are used in high fantasy literature, such as Lord of the Rings. I could not count the amount of symbols that are in that book, and I, as not somebody who's really, really familiar with Lord of the Rings and the symbolism from the Middle Ages and the symbolism from Roman Catholicism, could tell you and catch all of them. But when I think about that ring, I can tell you that that's a symbol of the corrupting power, the corrupting nature of power. And some people would even argue, hey, the power of the ring is actually the power of sin in the world. I mean, who knows? But high fantasy is always just full of symbols. You're going to find it there so much. Now, who discovers a symbol? Who makes them? Who assigns them? Well, one common way, and probably I personally feel is the best way, is that the author assigns them. And we got J.K. Rowling in the Harry Potter series. She's got symbols down to the names of characters. Severus Snape. Do you speak Latin? Well, not everybody does, but Severus means severe in Latin. Albus Dumbledore. What does albus mean? Albus means white in Latin. Voldemort. Well, that's actually also kind of a combination of two Latin words, and it means something like flying death. Also, in the Harry Potter series, we got the recurring symbol of a snake. And we're going to go over that really simply later, and you're going to figure out what that snake symbolizes if you haven't figured it out already, because it's kind of really obvious. But she's even got more subtle symbols that only somebody who's a medieval scholar and somebody who knows this concept of called alchemy and kind of the Christian Middle Ages would gravitate to right away. Unicorns. Turns out they're a symbol. I'm not going to tell you what that means. Griffins. Also a symbol. It's a combination of something that is the Lord of Heaven and the Lord of Earth. Golden snitch. Even that golden snitch that Harry Potter was chasing after and ready to grab and eventually got stuck in his mouth, that is a symbol for something too. And I can't count them, just like Lord of the Rings. It's kind of high fantasy, and it's got symbols all over the place. In what's called avant-garde storytelling, we have the audience assign symbols. And one great example of this is a movie called 2001: Space Odyssey. Stanley Kubrick made this movie. It's a very, very slow-paced movie, and it's actually very, very long to watch because it's kind of, well, odd. And it has a lot of things that could be symbols. We got HAL, a computer that does some pretty terrible things while it's on this spaceship and on this journey. We also have this recurring symbol of this huge, rectangular, mysterious black thing. It's like this high, it's black, and it's rectangular. It shows up when a bunch of chimpanzees are doing something. It shows up in space, and it shows up at the end of this movie with a bunch of weird stuff going on that I don't understand. We also have a spaceship that is made of rods and a lot of spheres. Now, a lot of people will speculate, what do all these things symbolize? What does this story mean? And people will go to Stanley Kubrick and they'll say, hey, Stanley, what does this mean? And he'll say, it's too deep into the subconscious to put into words. You must tell me. It's a collective thing. Everybody together is assigning meaning to these symbols. Okay, now that's a little erudite. It's a little hard to understand. Most of the time you're not going to be doing this. But I will tell you this. If you Google 2001: Space Odyssey and symbols, oh man, you will get a lot of results because everybody is trying to figure that movie out. And Stanley Kubrick is sadly no longer with us. And so he's not going to tell us what he meant, if he meant anything, by those symbols at all. There is at last a third way of assigning symbols to stories. First off, the audience assigns symbols despite the author. What do I mean by that? Well, we got To Kill the Mockingbird and A Huck Finn. These are kind of famous stories. One was written in the 60s, and one was written in the 19th century by our friend Mark Twain. And these authors went out of their way to say, hey, I was telling a funny story. I was telling a story to make a lot of money. I wanted to write something people would read. And the audience keeps coming to them and saying, well, what about this? Did you mean this as a symbol? I found a symbol in this story. And these authors are like, no, I didn't mean those symbols to be there at all. You're looking for something I didn't intend. And these authors can sometimes get frustrated by this, but it doesn't stop people from looking for symbols. And the point I'm trying to make for this is sometimes when your English teacher says, hey, go find a symbol, you might be looking for something the author didn't mean to be there at all. J.K. Rowling, C.S. Lewis, and J.R.R. Tolkien all wanted certain things to be symbols in their stories. Authors of Kill the Mockingbird and Huck Finn didn't really want symbols in there, but it doesn't mean that you're not going to find a lot of ink spilled and a lot of Google search hits on symbolisms on these stories. So, what could be a symbol? Well, it turns out anything that's tangible, visible, touchable can be a symbol. You can touch things, you can see it, it can be a symbol. So, how could it be an item? Like the one ruling ring in, the Lord of the Rings stories. It could be a place. Maybe Hogwarts has certain symbolic significance. I don't know. Maybe it symbolizes a magical world that Harry enters into. Characters. Characters themselves can be symbols. Turns out that in Lord of the Rings, Gollum actually symbolizes something. I'm going to let you research that for yourself to find out, but a lot of the times, characters, they themselves will be symbols. Now, how do we find a symbol? Well, does a symbol keep recurring throughout the story? Is it what we call a plot device? Think about the Pearl in that John Steinbeck novella that maybe you have read. If not, maybe it might be something to look up and maybe something you can go to the library for and check out on your own. But we got the Pearl. Everybody's concerned about the Pearl. Everybody wants the Pearl. Poor Mexican diver really wants to take care of this Pearl. What does this Pearl mean? It keeps coming up the story again and again. I'm going to repeat this to ad nauseum, but the One Ring is also a symbol. How about this? Does a symbol, does this thing, this tangible thing, show up at the climax or at other important times in the story? In 2001 Space Odyssey, as far as we could call it a story, that big rectangular black thing shows up at 3 important points throughout that movie. So maybe it's important to recognize that as a symbol. Or how about in Wrinkle of Time? We got it at the end of the Wrinkle of Time. Shows up in a very important place. How about that thing, that goblet of fire in the story, Goblet of Fire, in the Harry Potter series? How important was that? How important was the goal that Harry was after at the end of that story? Another really obvious way to recognize a symbol is, do the characters in the story recognize it as a symbol? So this is a little bit more complicated, but if there is something in the story that characters will recognize as a symbol, it probably means something like that to everybody else reading the story. So the house animals for each of the Harry Potter houses, the lion, the badger, the raven, and the snake. Okay, well, all of the characters in the Harry Potter series recognize those things as symbols of houses, but it turns out each one of those animals actually symbolizes something more for us, the readers. How about this? Another important thing is the context of the author. Now think back to that Roman victory statue. If I know the person who made it was a Roman, and I know that he made it during the Roman Empire, and I know that he was a Roman and he believed in things that were Roman, I should interpret that symbol like he would, like the maker of that symbol would. And I shouldn't interpret it like I might be tempted to. Like if I see the Nike swoosh symbol, I'm going to say, that means sneakers. But if I was a Roman and I saw that swoosh symbol, I would say, that means brutal military victory. We're awesome. So think about the time period that the author is in, and think about the country that they come from, and think about their culture. In the Harry Potter series and the Lord of the Rings series, we not only need to know the time that they came from and the place they came from, but also a lot of things about the Middle Ages, because they are just pulling symbols all over the place from the Middle Ages. It's crazy. So, now that we kind of understand a little bit what symbols are, we understand how to find them and how they're significant, how do we interpret them? What do they mean? Well, one thing you can do is you can just write down every time the symbol shows up and think about what else. How do I feel when that shows up? What other common things seem to be recurring around that symbol in the story? How about this? Snakes in Harry Potter. Slytherin House calls snakes the wisest of creatures. I'm Slytherin House. I don't know if you realize that. And it's also the menace in Chamber of Secrets is a giant snake. And Harry Potter and Voldemort can both talk to snakes. That's kind of interesting. Voldemort keeps a pet snake. And also, Nagini is pretty much Voldemort's closest thing to a friend. What do snakes symbolize in Harry Potter? I don't know. You tell me. Here's a clue. What did snakes also symbolize in the Christian Middle Ages? Because that is where J.K. Rowling is drawing all of her symbols from. The spice in the Dune series. As promised, I'm going to tell you about what this means. Well, the Dune series, we got spice, and it's on this planet that's just all desert, and you have to go out and gather it. It's acquired in a desert, and sometimes people die to get it. Without spice, there's no interstellar travel. You got to have the spice if you want ships moving around from planet to planet, trading goods, moving armies, moving people, taking a vacation. And as a consequence, because it's so hard to get and it's so needed, it can become very expensive. Which means that if you control the spice and you control the distribution of spice, then you have a lot of wealth and you have a lot of power. Now let's think about our world. Let's think about the real world. What do we need that's acquired in a desert, is used to ship goods around, and can be very expensive and will make you rich if you control it? Oil. Spice is a symbol for oil in the Dune series. Now, I'm not going to give you the answer to this one because this was actually one of the questions for your book response, and I really want to know what you think about this question. It at the end of Wrinkle in Time. If you haven't finished Wrinkle in Time, just go ahead and stop it right here and don't pay attention and get to the end of the book before you read this. Why is it a disembodied brain? Why? I mean, she could have made up anything to make up it, but why a disembodied brain? And why does this brain sit on a dais? Well, what is a dais? Who else sits on a dais? Also, I've noticed something about Wrinkle in Time, and that is we got the man with the red eyes, and there's some association with the color red. What does red symbolize in our world? What would have red symbolized to somebody writing a book in the 1960s when we were really, really afraid of something else that was red? So, to kind of wrap up symbols, let's go ahead and review. Symbols are tangible things that represent intangible things. The winged golden statue symbolizes military victory. The cross with a circle around it symbolizes Christianity in Ireland. The radiation symbol symbolizes run away scared, you'll get cancer if you stay here. Now, remember, anything tangible can be a symbol. If I can see it, I can touch it, I can interact with it, it could be a symbol. Doesn't mean it will be, it is. Interesting question. Who puts a symbol in the story? Is it the author or the reader? Who makes up the symbols? Also, how do we find symbols? Well, we really got to know about the importance the author places on the object, the place, or the person, and so on and so forth. Thanks again for using educator.com.